The world didn't stop spinning when I told Luca we couldn't be together. But it felt like it should have. My voice cracked, raw and jagged, as I stood in the rain outside his apartment. The words, "I'm a beta," slicing through the air like a blade. Seattle's drizzle clung to my jacket, soaking through to my skin as I stared at Luca's silhouette in the doorway. His hazel eyes, usually so steady, flickered with something I couldn't name. Hurt, maybe, or defiance. At 24, I'd learned to keep my heart locked tight, a habit born from years of navigating a world obsessed with alphas, betas, and omegas. But Luca, 27 and infuriatingly stubborn, wasn't letting me walk away so easily. "Ezra," he said, stepping into the rain, his voice low and deliberate, "I don't care what you are." His words hit like a thunderclap, shaking the walls I'd built. He reached for my hand, but I pulled back, my pulse racing. Betas don't get to love alphas like him. Not in this city, not in this world, where hierarchies dictate everything from jobs to relationships. I turned and walked away, the rain swallowing my footsteps, but I could feel his gaze burning into my back. The next morning, I woke to the buzz of my phone. A text from Luca, "Meet me at the rooftop garden. 6 p.m. Please." I wanted to ignore it, to bury myself in the monotony of my barista job at Brewed Awakening, a cozy coffee shop in Capitol Hill. But Luca had a way of unraveling me, like a thread pulled loose from a sweater. By 5:55, I was climbing the stairs to the rooftop, my heart a traitor beating too fast. The garden was a hidden gem, tucked above a community center, bursting with ferns and wildflowers. Luca stood by the railing, his dark hair catching the fading sunlight. He wore a faded denim jacket, sleeves rolled up, and the sight of him made my chest ache. "You came," he said, his smile soft but edged with something fierce. "I shouldn't have," I muttered, shoving my hands into my pockets. "This doesn't change anything, Luca. I'm a beta. You're an alpha. You know how this works." He stepped closer, undeterred. "I know how it's supposed to work. Alphas pair with omegas, betas stick to their lane. But I don't buy it, Ezra. I never have." His voice was a quiet rebellion, and I hated how it made my resolve waver. I turned away, staring at the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle cutting through the haze. "You don't get it," I said. "I've spent my life being told I'm not enough, not strong like an alpha, not nurturing like an omega. Just average. Invisible. You deserve someone who fits, Luca. Someone who can be your equal." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "My equal? Ezra, you're the only one who's ever challenged me. You think I care about some outdated label?" He reached out, his fingers grazing my jaw, and I froze. His touch was warm, grounding, and for a moment, I wanted to believe him. But the world wasn't that kind. I stepped back, my throat tight. "You're not listening. This isn't just about us. It's about everyone else, your family, your friends, the whole damn system. They'll never let us be." Luca's eyes darkened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he pulled a small, hand-carved wooden sign from his bag and set it on the railing. "Love defies labels." It read, the words etched with care. "I made this," he said quietly, "because I'm not giving up on us. Not yet." I stared at the sign, my heart twisting. Luca was an alpha, but not the kind who flaunted it. He was a carpenter, crafting furniture with a quiet passion, his hands steady and sure. I'd met him 6 months ago at Brewed Awakening, when he'd ordered a black coffee and lingered to sketch designs on a napkin. We'd talked for hours about art, music, the way the city hummed at night. I'd fallen for him before I even knew his designation, and when I found out he was an alpha, it felt like a cruel joke. "I can't do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not your omega, Luca. I'll never be what you need." He didn't move, didn't flinch. "You're exactly what I need," he said, and the certainty in his voice cracked something inside me. I turned and left, the weight of his words chasing me down the stairs. The next week was a blur of coffee steam and forced smiles. My coworker, Maya, a 22-year-old Omega with a knack for reading people, noticed the shift in me. "You look like you're carrying the world, Ezra," she said one slow afternoon, wiping down the counter. I shrugged, frothing milk for a latte. "Just tired." She raised an eyebrow. "Tired or heartbroken?" I didn't answer. Maya was sharp, her dark eyes missing nothing. She'd seen Luca come into the shop, seen the way he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. But she didn't know the whole story, and I wasn't ready to spill it. That evening, I found a package outside my apartment door, a small wooden box, intricately carved with patterns of stars and vines. Inside was a note in Luca's handwriting. "You're not invisible to me." My hands shook as I traced the carvings, each line a testament to his persistence. I wanted to hate him for making this so hard, but all I felt was a dangerous flicker of hope. At work the next day, Luca showed up. He didn't order anything, just sat at a corner table, sketching. When I brought him a coffee out of habit, he looked up, his eyes locking onto mine. "I'm not here to push you," he said. I miss you, Ezra." My throat burned. "You're making this impossible," I said, turning away before he could see the tears in my eyes. But as I walked back to the counter, I felt his gaze again, steady and unrelenting, like he was waiting for me to break. And maybe I was starting to. The days bled into each other, each one heavier than the last. Luca's presence lingered like a song I couldn't stop humming, even as I tried to drown it out with work and routine. I told myself I was doing the right thing, keeping my distance, but every time I saw his name light up my phone, my resolve crumbled a little more. It was a Thursday when everything shifted. I was closing up Brood Awakening, the shop quiet except for the hum of the espresso machine cooling down. Maya had left early, leaving me to sweep the floors alone. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see Luca, his hair damp from the evening mist, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but urgent. He wasn't asking. I leaned the broom against the counter, my heart pounding. "There's nothing to say, Luca. I told you. You told me you're a beta," he cut in, stepping closer. "And I told you I don't care. But you're not listening, Ezra. You're running." I bristled, my hands clenching. "I'm not running. I'm being realistic. You think love fixes everything? It doesn't. Not when the world's watching, judging, waiting for us to fail." He didn't flinch, but his eyes softened. "I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's worth it. You're worth it." I wanted to scream, to tell him he was naive, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and pushed past him, out into the cool night air. He followed, his footsteps steady behind me. We ended up at Pike Place Market, the stalls shuttered, the cobblestones slick with rain. The city felt alive around us, pulsing with possibility and danger. "Ezra," Lucas said, stopping under a street lamp. "Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me you don't want me, and I'll walk away. For good." I opened my mouth, but the lie wouldn't come. "Instead," I said, "you're an alpha, Luca. You could have anyone, someone who fits, someone who makes sense. Why me?" He stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold. "Because you see me. Not the alpha, not the label, just me. And I see you, Ezra. Not the beta, not the guy who thinks he's invisible. I see the man who laughs at my terrible sketches, who knows every lyric to Nina Simone, who makes the best damn coffee in Seattle." I laughed despite myself, a shaky sound that broke the tension. "You're ridiculous," I said, but my voice was softer now, less guarded. He took my hand, his fingers warm against mine. "Maybe, but I'm yours if you'll have me." For a moment, we stood there, the world narrowing to just us. I wanted to say yes, to let myself fall, but fear clawed at me. I pulled my hand away, shaking my head. I need time, Luca. I can't just ignore everything I've been taught. He nodded, his jaw tight. I'll wait, as long as it takes. The next day, I called in sick and took a bus to Alki Beach. The gray waves crashed against the shore, and I sat on a driftwood log, trying to untangle my thoughts. Growing up, I'd learned early that betas were the in-between, the ones who didn't stand out. My parents, both betas, had drilled it into me. Don't aim too high, don't draw attention. Love, they said, was for those who fit the mold, alphas with omegas, betas with betas. Anything else was asking for trouble. But Luca didn't fit that mold. He was an alpha who didn't care about power or status, who saw beauty in the things others overlooked. I thought of the wooden box he'd left me, the way his hands shaped raw materials into something meaningful. I thought of the way he looked at me, like I was more than a label. When I got back to my apartment, I found another gift on my doorstep, a small, carved bookmark with a quote from Audre Lorde. If I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. I held it, my chest tight, knowing Luca had chosen it for me. That night, I texted him, "Meet me at the rooftop tomorrow, 7 p.m. I didn't know what I'd say, but I knew I couldn't keep running. The rooftop was quieter than before, the city lights twinkling below. Luca was already there, leaning against the railing, a nervous energy in his posture. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, stepping closer. "I've been thinking. About us. About everything. I'm scared, Luca. Scared of what people will say, of what it means to be with you. But I'm more scared of losing you." His eyes lit up, but he stayed quiet, letting me speak. "I don't know if I can be what you need," I said, "but I want to try. I want us." He closed the distance between us, his hands cupping my face. "That's all I've ever wanted," he whispered, and then he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, but it deepened into something fierce and certain, like a promise. For the first time, I let myself believe we could rewrite the rules. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of stolen moments and quiet revelations. Luca and I carved out a fragile space for ourselves, a bubble where labels didn't matter. We'd meet at the rooftop garden, share late-night walks through Fremont, or sit in my tiny apartment, laughing over takeout and old jazz records. But the world outside our bubble was relentless, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it pushed back. It started with small things. A coworker at Brood Awakening raised an eyebrow when Luca dropped by, his alpha presence drawing attention. Maya, ever perceptive, pulled me aside one day. "People are talking, Ezra," she said, her voice low. "Not everyone's happy about you and Luca." I shrugged it off, but her words lingered. Seattle was progressive, but even here, the hierarchy ran deep. Alphas were expected to pair with omegas, to uphold a system that promised stability. A beta like me, daring to love an alpha, was a disruption. I saw it in the sidelong glances, the whispered comments when we walked hand in hand. Luca noticed too, but he refused to let it shake him. "Let them talk," he said one evening as we sat in a dimly lit diner, sharing a plate of fries. "They don't get to decide who we are." I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. "What about your family?" I asked. "You haven't told them about us, have you?" His face tightened, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. Luca's parents were traditional, rooted in a worldview that revered the alpha-omega bond. He'd avoided the topic, but I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing on him. "Let's not worry about that now," he said, squeezing my hand. "We're here. That's what matters." But it wasn't that simple. The next day, I got a call from my older sister, Mia, who lived in Tacoma. She'd heard rumors through mutual friends. "Ezra, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharp with worry. "An alpha? You know how this ends. They'll tear you apart." I gripped the phone, my stomach twisting. "It's not like that, Nia. Luca's different. She sighed. I just don't want you to get hurt. You're a beta, Ezra. You can't compete with an omega. Her words stung, echoing every insecurity I'd ever had. I hung up, my hands shaking. And when Luca came over that night, I couldn't hide the turmoil in my eyes. What's wrong? He asked, pulling me into his arms. I told him about Nia, about the whispers, about the fear that I'd never be enough. He listened, his jaw tight, and when I finished, he took my face in his hands. You are enough, he said fiercely. You're more than enough. And I'll prove it to you, to everyone. The next weekend, he invited me to a community art fair in Ballard. He'd been working on a piece, he said, something special. When we arrived, I saw it. A massive wooden sculpture, a tangle of abstract shapes that somehow felt alive, vibrant. At its base was a plaque, for Ezra, who taught me love has no boundaries. I stared at it, my throat tight. People around us whispered, some with admiration, others with judgment. But Lucas stood beside me, his hand in mine, unyielding. This is us, he said. This is what I believe in. For the first time, I felt seen, not as a beta, not as a defiance of the system, but as Ezra, the man Luca loved. I kissed him there, in front of everyone, and for a moment, the world didn't matter. But the moment didn't last. That night, Luca got a call from his father. I could hear the anger in the older man's voice through the phone, sharp and cutting. When Luca hung up, his face was pale. He wants to meet you, he said. Tomorrow. My heart sank. What did he say? Luca hesitated, then met my eyes. He said I'm throwing my life away, that I'm betraying my family by choosing you. The words hit like a punch. I wanted to run, to tell Luca to go back to his family, to find an omega who wouldn't cause this kind of pain. But he pulled me close, his voice steady. I'm not giving you up, Ezra. Not for him, not for anyone. I nodded, but fear settled in my chest like a stone. Tomorrow, we'd face his family. Tomorrow, we'd see if love could truly defy everything. The drive to Luca's family home in Bellevue felt like a march to judgment. The house was a sprawling craftsman, all warm wood and wide windows, but it loomed like a fortress as we pulled into the driveway. Luca squeezed my hand, his eyes steady. We're in this together, he said, and I clung to those words like a lifeline. Inside, his parents waited in the living room. His father, Marco, was a broad-shouldered alpha with a gaze that could cut glass. His mother, Elena, an omega, had a softer presence but a guarded expression. Luca's younger sister, Sophia, a 19-year-old beta, hovered near the doorway, her eyes curious but cautious. Ezra, Marco said, his voice cold as he stood to greet us. So you're the one my son's risking everything for. I swallowed, my mouth dry. I'm not here to cause trouble, sir. I love Luca. Marco's eyes narrowed. Love? You think that's enough? You're a beta. You can't give him what an omega can, stability, a family, a future. Luca stepped forward, his voice sharp. Dad, stop. I don't want an omega. I want Ezra. Why can't you see that? Elena spoke then, her voice soft but firm. Luca, we're not saying this to hurt you. We just want what's best. The world isn't kind to unconventional pairs. I felt like I was shrinking, every word confirming my worst fears. But Luca's hand found mine, grounding me. The world's wrong, he said, and I'm not going to let it dictate my life. The argument escalated, voices rising until Marco slammed his hand on the table. Enough, he shouted. You're throwing away your legacy, Luca. For what? A beta who'll never be enough. The room went silent. I felt the weight of their stares, the judgment I'd always feared. But then Sophia stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. Dad, you're wrong. Ezra's not just a beta. He's kind, he's smart, and he makes Luca happy. Isn't that enough? Her words hung in the air, a quiet rebellion. Marco's face softened, just for a moment, but he didn't speak. Elena reached for his hand, her eyes on me. "Ezra," she said, "tell us why you love our son." I took a breath, my voice shaky but honest. "I love Luca because he sees me. Not the beta, not the guy who's supposed to stay in his lane. He sees the parts of me I've spent my life hiding. The dreams, the fears, the hope. He makes me believe I'm enough, even when I don't. And I'd do anything to make him feel the same." The room was quiet again, but this time, it felt different. Marco sat down, his shoulders slumping. Elena's eyes glistened, and Sophia gave me a small, encouraging nod. Lucas squeezed my hand, his voice low. "Thank you," he whispered. We left the house that night with no clear resolution, but something had shifted. Marco hadn't apologized, but he'd listened. Elena had hugged me before we left, her embrace tentative but warm. And Sophia had slipped me a note. "Keep fighting for him. You're worth it." Back in Seattle, life didn't magically get easier. The whispers continued, the judgments lingered, but Luca and I grew stronger. We built a life together, piece by piece. Nights at the rooftop garden, mornings at Brood Awakening, moments where the world felt like it belonged to us. One evening, a year after that rainy night when I tried to walk away, Luca took me back to the rooftop. The garden was lit with string lights, the air warm with summer. He pulled me close, his eyes bright. "I made something for you," he said, leading me to a new wooden bench, carved with our initials and the words "Love defies labels." I laughed, tears in my eyes. "You're relentless, you know that?" He grinned, pulling me down onto the bench. "Only when it comes to you." As we sat there, the city sprawling below us, I realized something. The world hadn't changed, not really. The hierarchy still stood, the judgments still stung. But we'd carved out a space where none of that mattered. Luca treated me like his omega, not because of some label, but because he loved me, fiercely and unapologetically. And I loved him back, not as a beta or an equal, but as Ezra, the man who'd finally stopped running. We weren't perfect. We'd fight, we'd falter, we'd face the world's scrutiny again. But sitting there, with Luca's hand in mine, I knew we'd face it together. And that was enough.